Every Assassin's Creed protagonist has one moment fans call their smartest, and almost none of them involve a blade at all. The real genius shows up when grief and betrayal push these killers past revenge, towards something built to outlast them. One name on this list never even needed a kill to earn the top spot, and the reason why changes what smartest means for everyone ranked below him. Altair Ibn la Ahad. The most skilled assassin in the entire Brotherhood almost got the whole thing shut down in one afternoon. That is not an exaggeration. Altair ibn Ahad walks into Solomon's temple as the best blade Masyaf has ever produced, and walks out stripped of rank, stripped of weapons, and one bad decision away from execution. He breaks 3 of the assassin's core tenets in a single mission, gets a Templar named Robert disabled to the artifact before he does, and gets a fellow assassin killed in the process. Al-Mualim does not lecture him, he demotes him on the spot and sends him back out to earn his rank one target at a time. That demotion is the actual origin story, not the hidden blade, not the leap of faith, the demotion. 9 names get placed in front of him, each one a Templar-aligned power player buried inside the Third Crusade, and each kill is supposed to teach him something. His arrogance skipped the first time. Tamir. Garnier de Naplouse. Talal. Every target forces him to actually investigate instead of just charging in blade first, and by the end of that list, he is not the same assassin who got humiliated in Jerusalem, but the killing was never the point. It was the correction. Altair's real legacy is not a body count, it is a book. The codex he writes in his final decades takes everything he bled to learn about the Apple of Eden, about assassin philosophy, about the exact mistakes that got him demoted, and turns it into a manual future assassins will decode centuries later. He does not just get better at killing, he builds the reason nobody after him has to fail the same way he did. That is the actual smartest move in the franchise's founding chapter. Not the mission where he redeemed himself, the decision to make sure redemption stopped being necessary. He took a private humiliation and converted it into a permanent inheritance, and that pattern is about to repeat itself on a much bloodier scale. But writing down the answer is one thing. The next man didn't just inherit a book, he inherited a city full of enemies, and decided to dismantle an entire dynasty instead of just crossing names off a list. Ezio Auditore da Firenze. A 17-year-old watches his father and 2 brothers hang in a public square, and the smartest thing he could have done with that pain was spend the next 30 years killing everyone responsible. He almost did exactly that. Instead, he built something that made the killing optional. The revenge plot is simple, and everyone knows it. Vieri de Pazzi, Uberto, the Pazzi conspirators, the men who framed his family and strung them up in Florence. All of them end up dead by Ezio's hand or his design. That part reads like every other revenge story ever told. It's what comes after where he stops being interesting for the reason you'd expect. By the time Ezio reaches Rome, the target has changed shape entirely. The Borgia family doesn't run one conspiracy he can end with one knife. They run banks, churches, courtrooms, and city guards, and you cannot stab an economy. So Ezio buys shops. He funds guilds. He recruits thieves and mercenaries and courtesans into a working intelligence network. And he tears down actual Borgia towers across the city. Not for spectacle, but because each one physically weakens their grip on the district beneath it. That's not an assassin's move. That's a statesman's move wearing an assassin's hood. It escalates from there. In Brotherhood, Ezio stops being the guy with the hidden blade and becomes the guy who trains 100 other guys with hidden blades, building recruitment systems and safe houses across the entire city. In Revelations, he digs through Altair's actual memories in Masyaf, chasing information left behind by a man from 2 centuries earlier. Same instinct his predecessor had, writing his life down for someone who wasn't born yet, except Ezio takes it one step darker. He doesn't just read the archive, he becomes the guy who knows how to use it. The boy who wanted 3 specific men dead ends his story running an organization that no longer needs him to survive. Fans undersell that when they call him the charismatic one, the fun one, the people person of the franchise. Charisma built the alliances, but it took actual strategic patience to turn a bloodline's worth of grief into infrastructure that outlasted his own body. He never got his family back. He got something that made sure nobody else's family had to end up like his. But Ezio built his network in gilded cities where alliances could be bought with enough gold or enough charm. The next man had none of that. No courts to manipulate, no economy to strangle, no ally he could fully trust, just a burning frontier and a war that was always going to betray him no matter how well he played it. Connor Kenway. Connor won almost every fight he was smart enough to plan, and it still didn't matter. That is the cruelest math in this entire franchise. He is dropped into the American Revolution with 3 armies pulling in 3 directions, patriots, loyalists, and a Templar order wearing a patriot uniform, and he has 0 political weight to throw around. No banking empire, no family name that opens doors, just a homestead, a hidden blade, and a war that was never going to ask his permission. So he adapts. Connor's real skill is turning the enemy's own terrain into a weapon. He scouts before he strikes, uses the frontier itself as cover, and infiltrates forts and camps by reading patrol patterns nobody else bothered to track. He recruits colonial assets, feeds British supply lines false information, and repeatedly disables Templar operations before they finish forming. This is not a man improvising his way through cutscenes. This is disciplined, repeated, unglamorous tactical execution against a war zone the size of a continent, and he does it running on fragments. Connor rarely gets the full picture. He gets a rumor, a letter, a half-confirmed name, and he has to act anyway. Every plan he builds gets tested by chaos he didn't create and can't control. Compare that to Ezio, who eventually earned enough trust and infrastructure to shape entire cities. Connor never gets that room. He earns tactical wins on a battlefield where the political outcome was decided before he picked up a blade. That is the tragedy. He removes Templars, saves lives, outthinks ambushes, and the war chews his intentions up anyway. His homeland changes hands regardless of what he sacrifices. His mentor becomes his enemy. People he trusted burn his village to the ground. He plays the long game with real intelligence, and the world simply refuses to pay him back for it. Fans still argue Connor gets underrated because he's blunt, humorless, easy to write off as the stoic one. Follow the pattern of what he actually does, not what he says, and a quieter case emerges. A man executing frontier warfare with real precision, just without a single scene built to make you clap for it. Connor proves cleverness alone doesn't win. You need ground that lets your plan survive contact with the enemy. Connor lost because he had no room to maneuver on solid ground. The next man refused to fight on ground at all, and turned the open water into a battlefield where he set every rule. Edward Kenway. Edward Kenway never planned a fight in his life, and that is exactly why he won so many of them. Every other name on this list gets there by outthinking the board ahead of time. Edward gets there by refusing to sit down at it in the first place. He starts Black Flag chasing gold, not justice. A Welsh privateer who stumbles into a war between assassins and Templars and treats both sides like marks to be worked. No manifesto, no dead mentor demanding vengeance. Just a man who wants a bigger house and a fuller purse, and who is willing to steal a legendary coat off a corpse to get there faster. That hunger is what makes him dangerous. Put Edward on land in a straight fight and he is good, not exceptional. Put him on the deck of the Jackdaw with the wind changing and enemy sails closing in, and he becomes something else entirely. He reads the sea the way other protagonists read a crowd, using speed to dictate range, using angles to turn a broadside into a death sentence, using chase mechanics to bait bigger ships onto rocks they never saw coming. He does not outplan the Royal Navy. He outreacts it again and again in real time, with the ocean itself doing half the work for him. That is the trick nobody above him on this list gets to use. Connor had a cause and almost no leverage to force it through. Edward has no cause at all, at least not yet, and somehow manufactures leverage out of open water, loose cannon, and pure nerve. He does not wait for good ground. He turns whatever patch of ocean he is standing on into good ground on the fly every single time. Fans still argue about what that actually proves. Some call it genius, full stop, a man who understands systems better than he understands people. Others call it something smaller, the best improviser the series ever built, brilliant in the moment and lost without one. Nothing in the games settles it outright, but the pattern is hard to ignore. Every real turning point in Edward's story comes from him reacting brilliantly to chaos he didn't cause, never from a scheme he laid weeks in advance. By the end, he trades the gold for something that actually outlasts him, a family, a name his daughter can carry without shame. But that shift comes late and it comes reactive, same as everything else he does. Improvisation got him rich. It never quite made him a strategist. Edward read wind and water like a second language. The next assassin would learn to read something far more dangerous. The exact people who taught him how to kill. Shay Cormac, every assassin on this list learned how to kill quietly. Shay Cormac learned that better than any of them, and then he turned around and used it to kill the Brotherhood itself. That is not defection. That is an inside job with a body count. On the surface, Shay's story reads like a betrayal plot. He starts as an assassin, decides the order he swore loyalty to is chasing an artifact that could level a city, and walks. Simple enough, except walking away is not what he actually does. He picks up a Templar coat and spends the rest of Rogue hunting the exact people who trained him, using the exact methods they taught him. That is the part that makes him dangerous instead of just disillusioned. Shay knows the safe houses because he used them. He knows the extraction routes because he ran them. He knows how an assassin cell communicates, hides, and regroups because he built that muscle memory himself, mission after mission, before he ever pointed it the other way. When he moves against his former brotherhood across the 7 Years' War, from the Atlantic shipping lanes to the colonial frontier, he is not improvising. He is running their own playbook against them, and they never see the tell because the tell used to be one of their own. Fans still argue about this one. Some call it luck, a defector who happened to keep winning. But luck does not explain a man who anticipates ambushes before they are set, or who dismantles cells that took years to build in a matter of missions. That only works if he already knows the shape of the thing he is destroying, and he does. Compare that to the assassin we already watched build a system that could outlast him. Shay proves the reverse works just as well. You don't need years to tear something down if you helped design it in the first place. And underneath the tactics is a man who genuinely believes he is saving lives, which is what makes the betrayal cold instead of desperate. He is not lashing out, he is convinced, certain, and willing to burn every relationship he has to prove it. That kind of certainty does not come cheap. It costs him his brotherhood, his friends, and any version of himself that gets to be the good guy in someone else's story. Shay figured out exactly how one order thought, moved, and protected itself, then used that fluency to take it apart piece by piece. But knowing an order that well is nothing compared to what comes next, because the next mind on this list did not learn an existing system well enough to destroy it. This one learned something ancient, well enough to build a brotherhood that did not exist yet out of nothing at all, Arno Dorian, a city in the middle of tearing itself apart, and the smartest man in it is the one nobody notices at all. That is the joke sitting underneath all of Unity. The French Revolution is loud. Heads on pikes, mobs in the street, an entire social order dragged to the guillotine one aristocrat at a time. Arno Dorian survives that by doing almost none of it. He blends, he disguises, he walks into rooms full of people who would kill him on sight and walks back out with what he needed, and nobody even clocks that he was there. The obvious read on Paris in 1789 is chaos. Everyone screaming, everyone armed, everyone picking a side. Arno's actual method is the opposite of screaming. He reads the room, picks the quietest way through it, and lets the mob cover his tracks for him. Templars, plotting in one district, revolutionaries executing people 2 streets over, and Arno slipping between both factions in a change of clothes and a lowered hood, treated as furniture by men who would gut each other on principle. That is not brute force. That is barely combat at all, most of the time. It is a man who learned that in a city this overcrowded and this paranoid, the most dangerous weapon is being forgettable. Players who lean into Unity's disguise systems and crowd blending get an entirely different game than players who just start stabbing. And it is not an accident that the version where Arno reads people instead of killing them plays like an actual assassin. Here is the catch. Arno can read an entire room of strangers and still cannot read himself. His judgment about the people closest to him, the ones he actually loves, is consistently the thing that gets him hurt. He infiltrates institutions with total control, then torches his own standing over a woman or a grudge in about the time it takes to make a bad decision. Shay tore down an entire order from the inside and left it in ruins. Arno mastered the inside of one burning city and never built a single thing that survived past him leaving the room. He proves invisibility is a weapon, not a weakness, in a world that runs on being seen. He just never figures out how to point that same clarity at himself. The next man on this list did not learn to disappear inside a war he joined. He turned one dead body he could not undo into the reason an entire brotherhood exists at all. Bayek of Siwa. Bayek killed the men who murdered his son, and it didn't fix anything. That's the detail everyone forgets about the guy who supposedly started the assassins. Revenge came first, and revenge was hollow. What he built after is the only part that mattered. He's a medjay, which sounds like a fancy word for guard, but what he actually does in Ptolemaic Egypt looks a lot more like detective work. He infiltrates cults, tracks corrupt officials, maps out conspiracies stretching from Alexandria to Siwa. Every prior entry on this list improved a system that already existed. Bayek doesn't have that luxury. There is no brotherhood yet, no creed, no code, no symbol. Just a father with a dead son and a very long list of powerful people who deserve to suffer for it. That's where it gets uncomfortable. Every man on Bayek's kill list dies, every single one, and it changes nothing. His son is still gone, his marriage is cracking, the rage doesn't run out just because the targets do, so he and his wife Aya do something no protagonist before them had the opportunity to do. They build the thing from scratch. The Hidden Ones. Zero playbook, zero mentor, zero inherited ideology. Altair filled a library with lessons for the future. Ezio built an infrastructure standing on someone else's philosophy. Bayek and Aya wrote the first page. Here's the part fans actually argue about. A lot of people credit Bayek as the founder, full stop. But Aya is the one who takes the ideology to Rome, who kills Caesar, who arguably does more to turn the Hidden Ones into an actual movement. It's a fair fight. Bayek supplies the wound and the initial spark. Aya supplies the reach. Maybe the honest answer is that neither of them founds it alone, and the franchise just prefers a single face on the poster. What nobody debates is the cost underneath it. An organization built on hidden blades and quiet murder, invisible strings pulling entire empires, all of it traces back to one father who couldn't save his kid and turn that failure into a permanent institution. Every hooded figure for the next several hundred years is standing on architecture built out of a parent's grief. Bayek turned one death into a doctrine that outlived Egypt itself. But founding something is still small compared to what comes next, where one operative stopped building an organization and started manipulating every organization, cult, and power at once, without a single one of them realizing she was the common thread. Cassandra. Everyone remembers Cassandra as the woman who could kill a Cyclops-sized mercenary in a straight fight, and sure, she could. But that is the least impressive thing about her. The real skill is patience. Cassandra spends decades, actual decades, inside a war designed to chew her up, and she never lets it. Cultists try to use her as a blade. Spartans try to use her as a weapon of the state. Athenians try to use her as leverage. Even her own family tries to use her as a piece on a board that predates the war itself. Every single one of them wants to point her at something and let go. She does not let go easy. Cassandra spends the Peloponnesian War building something quieter than a kingpin's empire, quieter even than what Bayek left behind with his Brotherhood. She builds a record. She hunts down the cult of Cosmos not with one big raid, but with years of tracking, bribing, infiltrating, and outliving members who assumed she would die before she got close. Some cultists wait entire campaigns for her to slip up. She just does not slip up. Then the stakes stop being political. She gets tied to Isu artifacts, staffs, and spears older than the war itself, tools that put her in the middle of a conflict thousands of years deeper than Sparta versus Athens. That is the moment her adaptability stops being a personality trait and starts being survival math. One wrong move with First Civilization tech, and she is not losing a contract, she is losing everything. Fans love arguing whether her canon status over Alexios is fair, since the game lets you pick. It is fair. The pattern of the story, the weight of the choices, all of it points at her as the one who is always going to make it out. Not because she hits harder, because she reads every room before she walks into it. She wanted a family back. She lost decades to a war that was never really about her, and what she gets instead is time, more of it than anyone hunting her, because she never let herself become anyone's permanent weapon. Cassandra proved you could survive an entire era by refusing to be aimed, but surviving a war is not the same as owning what comes after it, and the next protagonist figured out how to turn the chaos itself into something that could not be taken back once the fighting stopped. Eivor. Eivor kills more people than almost anyone else on this list, and somehow it barely matters. The raids look like the whole story. Longships hitting the English coast, axes doing the talking. That's the part everyone remembers, the part that ends up in every highlight reel and every trailer. It's not the part that actually made Eivor dangerous. The actual weapon was a map covered in alliances. Ravensthorpe starts as a patch of mud and a handful of exiled Norsemen with nowhere else to go. No supplies, no leverage, nothing but a name and a grudge. Look at where it ends up. By the end, it's a functioning seat of power, stocked, staffed, and wired into nearly every region in England through deals Eivor personally brokered one longhouse conversation at a time. Grantebridge Sire falls in line. East Anglia gets pulled into the fold. Oxenford Sire, Lincoln Sire, Syrup Sire. One by one, they get folded into a network that outlasts every single sword swing it took to build it. Each alliance means resources flowing back to one settlement, grain, timber, warriors, coin. Every raid becomes funding, not the end result, which is a distinction most people watching the fighting completely miss. Fans have spent years arguing about what Eivor actually is. Warrior or strategist? The blood-soaked highlight reel says warrior, obviously, that's the easy read. The alliance map says otherwise, and the alliance map is the part still standing after the credits roll. You don't consolidate 6 or 7 regions by accident. You do it because you're thinking 2 moves past the guy currently bleeding on your axe. That's the same upgrade this whole video keeps tracking. A woman outlasting an entire order from the inside. A man laying bricks for a brotherhood that didn't exist yet. Eivor takes both of those instincts and fuses them into something you can actually walk through. Gates, a longhouse, allies bringing tribute instead of trouble. It's empire building you can put your hand on, and underneath all of it sits something Eivor never fully controls. Isu ruins, buried memories, a destiny wearing a Viking's face. Eivor builds the most visible legacy in the entire franchise, timber and treaties anyone could see and touch, while forces older than England quietly use that ambition for their own ends. The empire building is real. It's just not entirely Eivor's idea, and Eivor never gets to find that out. Out in the open, permanent, undeniable. That's Eivor's whole move. Somewhere else, at the exact same time, someone was building something just as permanent by making sure nobody ever knew he'd built anything at all. Basim Ibn Ishaq. Every other name on this list got to keep their story. Basim doesn't even get to keep his own memory. That's not a metaphor. In 9th century Baghdad, he starts as exactly what he looks like. A clever street thief with fast hands and faster instincts. The kind of guy who reads a crowded souk the way other people read a room. He learns to disguise himself, to infiltrate guarded compounds, to vanish into a city of 1 million strangers without leaving a mark. Judged purely on craft, he might be the cleanest assassin the franchise has ever built. No system to lean on, no order backing him, just raw observation and nerve, hiding in plain sight in the busiest city on earth. But hiding in a crowd is not the same as hiding from yourself. Baghdad only shows you the surface. The deeper continuity reveals that Basim's identity was never fully his to begin with, that something ancient and enormous had been wearing him like a coat for longer than he understood. Every disguise he ever put on in Mirage was already a rehearsal for the biggest disguise of all, a man convinced he was in control of his own choices, while a far older intelligence played the long game underneath him. Nothing in the games states outright that this was the plan from the very first heist. But follow the pattern. The thief who could disappear into any crowd was, underneath it all, something no crowd could ever fully contain. And once you know that, you don't rank his stealth the same way anymore. Think about what that means next to everyone before him. Eivor built a settlement out in the open, a system with his name on it, visible for anyone to admire. Every other protagonist on this list turned a wound, a dead brother, a stolen family, a broken order, into something that outlived them. Something you could point to and say, that's the legacy. Basim's wound gets rewritten from the inside. His legacy is that you cannot even locate where the pain started, because the thing steering him buried it under 100 years of somebody else's war. That's the ceiling. Not killing quietly, existing quietly inside a conflict you secretly started, while everyone around you argues over who the mastermind might be. So here's the reframe. Every protagonist before him was smart in the open, building, adapting, outsmarting enemies you could name and point at. Basim was smart in the dark, playing every side of a war so completely that the franchise itself needed extra games just to explain what he'd been doing the whole time. The blade was never the point was that nobody, not the Templars, not the Hidden Ones, not even the player, clocked who was actually holding it. The smartest thing an assassin ever did wasn't disappearing a target, it was disappearing himself, so completely that his greatest victory was never getting caught, being the one behind it all. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.